grey dawn was but a promise on the horizon, painting the austere barracks of the Wessex Downs proving grounds in shades of muted charcoal. As Chief Warrant Officer Alistair Tank, Finch meticulously calibrated his spotting scope. 20-3 years serving His Majesty's Marines had imbued him with a profound, almost spiritual reverence for the lone 115A3 sniper rifle. Yet this particular morning, the formidable instrument seemed to hum with an uncharacteristic impatience in his experienced hands. Through the powerful lenses, Alistair observed the newest candidate to their elite marksmanship program, Staff Sergeant Eleanor Vance. There was an arresting calmness in her movements, quiet assurance that commanded his immediate attention.
Mission to engage at 1500
Whilst other
meters.
recruits often displayed a palpable apprehension on their inaugural encounter with such a weapon, she handled the massive rifle with the effortless grace of one born to its very purpose. A cluster of fellow instructors, mostly burly sergeant majors with years of grueling service etched upon their faces, murmured among themselves, their hushed tones betraying a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled skepticisms regarding the female Marine who had secured a transfer to their notoriously demanding program. Their doubts hung in the crisp morning air, as pervasive and fine as the dust that coated the windswept plain. Alistair, a man of few words but sharp observation, remained impassive, watching as Eleanor, with the precision born of innate talent and arduous practice, checked each component of her equipment. Think she can't really manage the recoil of that beast, Shiv? Whispered Sergeant Major Giles Davies, a man whose gruff exterior belied a keen eye for talent, though his tone was laced with habitual doubt. He nodded towards the formidable rifle, notorious for its punishing kick, capable of bruising even the most seasoned shoulder. Alistair did not immediately respond. There was a certain economy in Eleanor's gestures, a deliberate quality
Eleanor,
that reminded him
what's
of
your
the
background
seasoned
then?
marksman he had encountered in the far minus flung, unforgiving theaters of His Majesty's previous engagements. Her hands moved across the rifle's polished metal and dark wood with the familiarity of one whose very survival had often depended upon such instruments. The vast training range stretched before them, a tapestry of stark earth and distant targets, each flagpole fluttering a signal of the subtle, shifting winds. Standard protocol dictated that new candidates commence at a modest 800 meters, gradually extending their reach. Yet Eleanor, with a composure that verged on the audacious, stepped to the firing line, adjusted her position with elegant precision, and promptly requested permission to engage targets at a staggering 1500 meters. Staff Sergeant, with due respect, we typically commence newcomers at a somewhat closer range.
So,
Lieutenant Charles Morrison, the range safety officer, interjected, his voice carrying the polite condescension often reserved for those deemed inadequately prepared for serious marksmanship. Eleanor looked up from her scope, her eyes, though but 8- and 20 years old, possessing a depth and stillness that suggested a far greater accumulation of experience. Sir, she replied, her voice steady and clear, if you would permit, I would much prefer to demonstrate my current capabilities, rather than reiterate rudimentary qualifications. Alistair found himself drawn closer, an inexplicable pull guiding his steps. There was something in her tone, a quiet confidence utterly devoid of boastfulness, that suggested her words were not an empty challenge. He had heard that very timbre before,
43 confirmed,
often from snipers who had honed their deadly trade in the most perilous and remote corners of the world. The wind, ever a capricious companion on the Salisbury Plain, picked up slightly, causing the range flags to dance with renewed vigor. Eleanor, without perceptible haste, paid minute adjustments to her scope, calculating for windage with the alacrity of one accustomed to such calculations under extreme duress. She settled into her shooting position with the fluidity of a river finding its path. The lone 115A3 thundered across the open expanse, its distinctive report echoing off the ancient, rolling hills of Wiltshire. Through his spotting scope, Alistair focused on the target at 20-500 meters, a perfect center hit. The other instructors fell into a sudden, profound silence, their casual discourse abruptly extinguished as the weight of what they had just witnessed settled upon them. A stroke of luck. Strongly, Davies muttered, though his voice now carried significantly less conviction than before. Eleanor, unperturbed by the whispered doubt, chambered another round, her gaze unwavering through the scope. A second shot followed swiftly, again finding the precise center of the distant target. Then a third, creating a grouping so tight it would have compelled admiration from even the most seasoned professionals. Alistair lowered his binoculars, his gaze fixed upon Eleanor's face. There was no flicker of satisfaction in her expression, no hint of pride at having silenced her doubters. Instead, he appeared almost disaffected, as if the entire demonstration had been but a routine exercise. This remarkable lack of overt emotion intrigued him more than her extraordinary marksmanship itself. Where, pray tell, did you receive your prior training, Staff Sergeant? Alistair inquired, approaching the firing line with a measured tread. Eleanor looked up, meeting his direct gaze without hesitation. Various theaters. Chief Warrant Officer. He served 18 months in Al-Gadra. Then 2 tours in Zaravan, with specialist reconnaissance units of His Majesty's service. The answer? Whilst accounting for her evident competence, scarcely illuminated the singular skill she had just displayed. Alistair had worked alongside countless combat veterans. Whilst experience was undoubtedly invaluable, what he had just witnessed suggested an aptitude far surpassing typical military instruction. Any particular specialization within reconnaissance. He pressed, his voice even. For the first time, Eleanor hesitated. A momentary flicker of consideration passing across her features. Primarily counter-minus sniper operations. Chief, our mandate was to identify and neutralize enemy marksmen targeting our forward patrols. Alistair nodded slowly. Counter-minus sniper work was among the most exacting forms of marksmanship, demanding not only exceptional shooting ability, but also the uncommon fortitude to operate under unimaginable stress. It also implied that Eleanor had, in all likelihood, engaged human targets at substantial distances, an experience that invariably alters a shooter in fundamental ways. The afternoon sun, a pale English orb, began its languid descent towards the western hills when Alistair reached his decision. Rather than adhering to the standard progression of training exercises, he would test Eleanor's capabilities more thoroughly if she truly possessed the extraordinary skills her morning demonstration suggested. The program, and indeed His Majesty's service, stood to benefit immensely from a comprehensive understanding of her unique abilities. Staff Sergeant Vance, he called out, as she meticulously cleaned her rifle. Report to my office at 600 hours tomorrow. We shall have a discussion regarding your background. Eleanor looked up from her cleaning kit, her brow faintly furrowed. Is there some issue with my qualifications? Chief? Alistair, a man rarely given to outward displays of amusement, permitted himself a slight smile. On the contrary, Staff Sergeant, I rather suspect your qualifications might prove considerably more impressive than your official file indicates. As the day concluded, and the other candidates retired to their quarters, Alistair remained on the range, his gaze fixed upon the distant targets Eleanor had so effortlessly engaged. In his extensive experience, marksmen of her caliber did not materialize randomly in training programs. They were invariably the products of highly specific circumstances, often involving situations that rarely found their way into official records. Tomorrow's conversation, he mused, promised to be most illuminating. Alistair arrived at his office before the first blush of dawn, a habit of long standing. The comforting aroma of freshly brewed tea already permeated the air when Eleanor knocked precisely at 600 hours. He appreciated punctuality, a further mark in her favor. She entered with the same controlled, almost balletic movements he had observed on the range. Taking the offered seat across from his imposing oak desk, Your service record makes for rather interesting reading.
Keep your core
Alistair
tight.
began, opening a classified folder
Breathe
with a
slowly
deliberate gesture.
and deeply.
Military crosses, a conspicuous gallantry cross, and a mention in dispatches for valor that is, shall we say, rather heavily redacted. Most Marines with your decorations do not typically request transfer to training programs. Eleanor sat perfectly still, her hands clasped calmly in her lap. I requested this assignment, Chief, with the express intention of sharing my
All right, let's
experience
visualize
with
this.
other service members. Alistair leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed upon her. That is a most commendable goal, Staff Sergeant. However, your demonstration yesterday suggests an experience that transcends what is documented in your official file. The
Wow,
silence
I can't
stretched
believe it.
between them, fraught with unspoken meanings. Alistair had interrogated enough individuals
Well, that
in
was a
his
good one.
career to recognize when a person was meticulously weighing their words. Eleanor, it was clear, was debating the precise measure of truth to reveal. What specifically would you wish to ascertain, Chief? Let us commence with a rather simpler
You are
inquiry.
capable of more
What is the
than you
longest
realize.
confirmed shot you have effected in combat?
Great
Eleanor's
job,
gaze
everyone.
drifted towards
get
the
this
small
loaded.
window, seeking
for
the
the next
distant,
phase.
familiar hills. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight, a quiet resonance that Alistair recognized from his own indelible memories of difficult missions. The official record states 3,040-7 meters. Chief, it was during a mission to extract a downed pilot near Kandahar. Denied.
Your students
Alistair
are
waited
utterly convinced.
patiently. The word official suggested, quite unequivocally,
Most
the existence
limitations
of
are
an
mental,
unofficial
not
counterpart.
technical.
And
Technical.
unofficially, Staff Sergeant. Eleanor turned back, her eyes
Is
meeting
that
his
how you
directly.
achieved your
3,240-7 meters. Chief, during a classified operation
Partly,
that does not,
but also
in fact,
perfect conditions
feature in my
and
standard
luck.
service record. Alistair felt his eyebrows rise involuntarily. A shot of such prodigious distance was extraordinary.
All right then.
He felt by the most stringent standards of elite snipers that would place you amongst a truly select few marksmen worldwide who have achieved such precision under combat conditions. Alistair observed, his voice carefully neutral. Such achievements typically receive considerable, if not public, recognition. Not when the mission, Chief, officially never occurred. Eleanor stated, her voice devoid of inflection. Alistair understood immediately. Eleanor had been involved in what were euphemistically termed black operations, missions of such profound secrecy
So the key thing
that
to
their
remember
very
about
existence was
reading the
officially
chart-
denied by the government and
that takes us
purged
to
from
our
all
next
official
point.
records.
So,
Hey,
if you could just note
such
this down,
assignments,
please.
she knew, were typically entrusted only
You
to
must
the
account
most
for the
exceptionally
Coriolis effect
capable
and spin drift when
operators,
calculating
which
fixed
undeniably
range
accounted for
targets.
her prodigious skills. Are you at liberty to discuss the circumstances? However broadly, Eleanor shook her head, a barely perceptible movement. The operation remains classified above my current clearance. Chief, I can only reveal that it involved a high-minus-value
I
target
understand the
who
implications
was directing
of this
attacks
decision.
against His Majesty's forces from what he believed to be a safe and insurmountable distance. Alistair
Multiple
nodded.
branches
He
have
had,
requested
in
your
his own
instruction,
distinguished
Eleanor.
career, been involved in similar undertakings, operations demanding extraordinary
been
skill and
truly
an
exemplary.
absolute,
Her students
unshakable
surpassing
discretion.
all expectations.
Psychological toll of such work, she knew, was
The
often
Defense
immense,
Intelligence Agency has taken a very
which
keen
might well
interest in
explain
Eleanor's
Eleanor's
background.
singular request for a training assignment. How many confirmed eliminations do you account for? In total? He continued, his pen poised above her file.
Finch,
40
Ministry of
minus 3
Defense has ordered
confirmed.
a formal
Sure.
demonstration.
17 probable. The figures were staggering. Most snipers
When is
considered
the
themselves
evaluation
highly
scheduled?
successful with half that tally over an entire career. Eleanor had achieved these
Next
results in a
Tuesday,
mere 3
with
years of
observers from
deployment.
all
And you
branches of
desire to
service.
instruct here because, for the first time, Eleanor's carefully composed expression
This will
wavered,
pressure
subtle
Eleanor
tremor
back
of
into
emotion
perilous
passing through
operational
her.
roles.
Because I am weary of taking lives. Chief, I would
Sometimes
much prefer to
individual
save them
preferences
by
must
training
yield
others to
national
protect their
requirements.
comrades. Alistair recognized the profound exhaustion in her voice. a weariness he had observed in many an elite operator who had reached their
Eleanor,
personal
could you come in,
limits.
please?
The transition from active combat to training roles was often fraught with difficulty, but sometimes he knew it was a necessary concession to mental well-being. The lone 115A3 is not typically employed for training at this facility. Alistair continued, subtly
Live fire
shifting the
beyond
subject.
2,500 meters, with all
We
service
primarily
observers present.
focus on medium-range precision rifles. Why did you specifically request to demonstrate with that particular weapon? Because it was my primary weapon during the classified missions.
Officially,
Chief,
refusal is not possible.
I am
Unofficially,
most familiar,
delay
and
might be
indeed
argued.
most comfortable, with its precise capabilities and limitations. Alistair made further notes in Eleanor's file as they conversed. Her answers were consistently professional and
Would you be able to
meticulously
deliberately
coherent,
perform below
yet he
expectations
summed
for a short period of time?
with a veteran's intuition that there remained much more to her untold story. Tell me of your training background, Staff Sergeant.
Yes, I understand.
Where did you develop these quite extraordinary skills? Eleanor straightened slightly. Her posture as impeccable as ever. I was raised on a remote estate
I
in
need
the
to
Scottish
speak to
border.
Colonel David.
Chief,
It's regarding
my
an
father
urgent
was a
matter.
gentleman farmer, but also a formidable competitive long-range shooter who commenced my instruction and the fundamentals from the tender age of 8. I was competing in 1,000-yard matches by my 16th year. The background made perfect sense. Many of
What
His Majesty's finest
strategic assignments are being
military
considered
snipers
for the next
invariably
quarter?
hailed from hunting and competitive shooting backgrounds. The purely technical skills could be rigorously
Eleanor will be
acquired,
assigned a
but the
mission
essential
critical
mental
to national
fortitude
security.
required for long-range precision was
Eleanor
oft
requested
unnurtured and
reassignment
developed
from
during
combat
childhood.
roles,
Your
citing
psychological
mental well-being
evaluations
concerns.
indicate a quite remarkable stress tolerance, Alistair observed, perusing the documents.
Individual wishes may not always
No
override
discernible
national
symptoms of combat
priorities.
fatigue or post-traumatic stress. Despite extended deployment, I have been fortunate in that regard. Chief, Eleanor replied, her voice even. Alistair doubted it was merely
I will not
fortune.
give up.
In his experience, operators who survived extensive, high-stress missions usually possessed either exceptional mental resilience or remarkably effective coping
Eleanor.
mechanisms.
I need a word.
What do you hope to accomplish here?
Yes, sir.
Staff Sergeant. Eleanor looked directly at him,
The pressure from
her
MOD
focus
remains
unwavering.
strong.
I wish to instruct other service members in the art of survival. Chief, every technique I am
will
able
seek
to impart
every
might,
avenue
in due
to protect
course,
your role
preserve
here.
British lives downrange. Alistair closed the folder and leaned forward, his expression grave but impressed. Based upon our conversation, Staff Sergeant, and your quite exceptional demonstration, I am recommending your immediate assignment as a senior instructor. You will be tasked with teaching advanced long-range techniques to our most experienced candidates. Eleanor's expression remained outwardly neutral. But Alistair caught a fleeting, almost imperceptible, flash of relief in the depths of her eyes. However, he continued, I wish you to understand that some of your students will, in all likelihood, achieve feats that may surpass anything in your official record, if you are comfortable with providing instruction to such a level. We may proceed. Eleanor rose, extending her hand with a formal grace. I would be deeply honored to serve in that capacity. Chief, as Alistair shook her hand, he realized, with a surge of quiet satisfaction, that his program had just acquired one of the most capable instructors it had ever had the privilege to host. Eleanor's unique combination of unparalleled field experience and formidable technical skill would, he felt certain, benefit countless service members for years to come. After she had departed his office, Alistair sat quietly for several minutes, contemplating the profound implications of what he had learned. Eleanor Vance was, beyond a shadow of a doubt, a remarkable operator. Yet, he suspected, with a growing sense of certainty, that even their candid conversation had only scratched the very surface of her true capabilities. 3 weeks later, Eleanor stood before her inaugural class of 12 advanced students. Alistair observed from the back of the spacious classroom. curious to witness how she would navigate the delicate transition from formidable operator to eloquent instructor. How students were, themselves, seasoned snipers, some with multiple deployments and considerable combat experience under their belts. Good morning, gentlemen, Eleanor began, her voice carrying clearly and confidently through the room. Before we delve into advanced techniques, I wish to ascertain your current capabilities. Who amongst you can tell me the effective range of the lone 115A3 sniper rifle? Several hands, eager to prove their knowledge. Shut up, Sergeant Major Thomas Thompson, a veteran of 3 tours and all-minus cadre, answered with confident gravitas. 800 meters for reliable first-minus shot accuracy. Staff Sergeant Eleanor nodded, a subtle acknowledgement that Sergeant Major is the standard answer. It is also, for our purposes, quite incorrect. The room fell into an abrupt, almost stunned silence. Thompson looked visibly puzzled, clearly grappling with the notion that his textbook answer could possibly be erroneous. The effective range of any rifle, Eleanor continued, her gaze sweeping across the expectant faces, depends entirely on the operator's skill, the prevailing environmental conditions, and the precise mission requirements. I have witnessed skilled shooters achieve reliable hits at 1200 meters with an 115A3, and I have observed others miss consistently at 400 meters. She moved to the whiteboard, her movements fluid and purposeful, and began to sketch a simple diagram illustrating bullet trajectory, the subtle effects of wind, and target zones. Today, gentlemen, we shall discuss how to extend your effective range beyond what you currently believe to be possible. But first, we must address the pervasive mental aspects that invariably limit most shooters. Staff Sergeant William Smythe, a Royal Marine with extensive combat experience, raised his hand, his expression a mixture of curiosity and healthy skepticism. Staff Sergeant, if I may,
We follow protocol.
what
Understood?
magnitude of ranges are we contemplating? Eleanor paused in her drawing, turning to face the class directly. By the combination of this course, each of you should be capable of making first-minus shot hits at ranges 300 to 500 meters beyond your current perceived maximum. Skeptical murmurs rippled through the room. A collective exhalation of disbelief. Alistair watched the students' faces, discerning the deep-seated doubt that Eleanor would undeniably need to surmount. I comprehend that this may sound ambitious, Eleanor acknowledged. Yeah, her voice unwavering. Permit me to share a pertinent example from my own experience. She returned to the whiteboard, sketching a tactical scenario with rapid, pursued strokes. Surpass 2090. Our unit received intelligence that a rebel commander was orchestrating attacks from a fortified compound nestled deep within a remote valley. The standard approach would have necessitated a highly dangerous insertion, placing our team at considerable, indeed unacceptable, risk. The room fell into a profound silence, every eye fixed upon Eleanor as she continued her narrative. The compound lay 2,400 meters from the nearest concealed position that afforded a clear line of sight. Weather conditions were, to put it mildly, challenging, with capricious, dusty winds and highly variable visibility. Eleanor marked wind patterns and subtle elevation changes onto her diagram with practiced ease. Employing techniques I shall endeavor to teach each of you, I was able to execute a successful engagement from that considerable distance, thereby eliminating the threat without Geopratis' additional personnel. Sergeant Major Thompson leaned forward, his earlier skepticisms now replaced by a genuine, curiosity. Staff Sergeant, what specific techniques, if you please, rendered that shot feasible? Eleanor permitted herself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Patience.
Eleanor belongs here, Rupert.
Sergeant Major, we shall meticulously work through each vital element. Systematically, she dedicated the next hour to an exhaustive explanation of advanced ballistics calculations, elucidating how factors such as air density, temperature gradients, and even the subtle rotation of the Earth influenced bullet flight at such extreme ranges. Most shooters, Eleanor explained, focus exclusively upon windage and elevation. But at ranges exceeding 500 meters,
Flawless may be
one must
precisely
also
the
account for
problem.
Coriolis effect, spin drift, and the often overlooked vertical wind components. The students, now utterly captivated, took detailed notes as Eleanor expertly worked through complex mathematical formulas. Alistair was deeply impressed by her teaching methodology,
Eleanor, your
which built from
demonstration was
fundamental
simply
principles to highly
amazing.
advanced concepts in a
right?
logical,
She is so
eminently
skilled.
digestible progression. Now, for the practical application, Eleanor announced, her voice resonating with authority. We shall forthwith proceed to the range for live-fire
She makes the
exercises.
impossible look
At the range,
routine.
Eleanor had meticulously prepared targets at distances ranging from 1,000 to 2,000 meters. She demonstrated each technique with flawless execution before inviting students to attempt it themselves. Sergeant Major Thompson, she instructed, you will engage the target at 1,400 meters. Calculate your firing solution utilizing the precise methods we have just discussed. Thompson, now thoroughly chastened and acutely focused,
She is more
worked
valuable
through the
here than black
mathematics with
assignments.
painstaking care, making precise adjustments for wind and elevation. His first shot, despite his efforts, missed the target entirely. What? Pray tell, went awry? Eleanor inquired,
Not again.
her tone inquiring rather than
can't.
critical. Thompson studied his calculations, a frown of intense concentration upon his brow. I believe I underestimated the wind effect. Staff Sergeant. Correct. Eleanor affirmed. But you also made an assumption about our density, based upon the temperature at our immediate position. Our density,
Reassigning
as
Eleanor
we
would damage
discussed,
the training program.
alters with altitude, and your target is 200 feet higher than our current
This is
firing
not your
position.
decision, Chief.
Eleanor
But let it be
patiently
led.
guided Thompson through the corrected calculations. His second shot,
Eleanor's
a testament to her
mental well-being will
precise
collapse
guidance,
under renewed
struck
black
within mere
assignments.
inches of the target's center. An outstanding improvement. Sergeant Major,
The
has
MOD
each student
sees you
attempted
as an
increasingly
irreplaceable
arduous
asset.
shots. Eleanor provided specific, tailored guidance, seemingly
let her
capable of
teach.
instantaneously
She
identifying
multiplies
each
her
shooter's
skills
limiting
through
factors.
others.
Staff Sergeant Smythe struggled noticeably with target acquisition at long-minus
Colonel Harrison
range.
speaking.
Eleanor patiently taught him breathing
We have a
techniques
situation.
that profoundly
I
improved
need
his
you to
natural
confirm
stability.
Eleanor's reassignment.
Corporal Edward Matthews possessed excellent technical skills, but evinced a distinct lack of confidence for extreme minus-range shots. Eleanor
else,
worked
Finch?
assiduously with him on mental
We must
preparation and
consider
visualization
every angle,
methods.
sir.
By the close of the day, every
Eleanor's
student had
teaching has
successfully
already
engaged targets at
transformed
ranges
dozens of
they had
Marines.
previously considered utterly impossible. The pervasive SEP systems of the morning had been unequivocally replaced by a genuine enthusiasm for Eleanor's remarkably effective methods. Tomorrow,
You send her
gentlemen, Eleanor
back, you will
announced
break
as
the
the shadows
finest
lengthened,
instructor we have ever had.
we shall work on moving targets in adverse weather
We require
conditions.
her here
This
longer.
evening, I expect you to review
Training
the
impact is
mathematical formulas and
unprecedented.
practice the breathing exercises. As the students gathered their equipment, a palpable buzz of accomplishment
full
in the air,
justification for this
Alistair approached Eleanor. The most
She
impressive
extends
inaugural
the
day.
capabilities of entire
Hmm.
units.
Staff
Just herself.
Sergeant. Your students appear, shall we say, utterly convinced. Eleanor cleaned her lone 115A3 with methodical precision as she responded. They are capable of far more
The
than they
MOD
currently
will review it,
realize.
But
Chief,
there's no immediate
most
reassignment.
limitations, I find, are mental rather than
Thank
purely
you, Harrison.
technical. Alistair watched her effortlessly disassemble the rifle with practiced efficiency. Is that, then, how you achieved your record shot? By overcoming these mental
Eleanor,
limitations?
there's been a
Eleanor
development.
paused in her cleaning routine. Her gaze thoughtful. Partly, Chief, but that particular
Eleanor,
shot also
we have a problem.
necessitated truly perfect conditions in.
The MOD
One must
delayed your
admit,
reassignment for
a
further
considerable
review,
measure
at
of
my
good
suggestion.
fortune. Alistair sensed, with his usual acuity, that there was yet more to the story. But Eleanor had already returned to her meticulous equipment maintenance, her expression a polite
For now, your
but firm
place
closure
remains
to the
here as
subject.
instructor.
Whatever specific details surrounded her extraordinary achievement,
But how long
she was
before they
clearly
come again?
disinclined to discuss them at length. As they walked back towards the main building, the twilight deepening around
as I'm
them,
here,
Alistair
find
reflected upon all
resistance.
he had observed. Eleanor's teaching methods were, to be sure,
let us continue our
unorthodox,
analysis of the
but their efficacy was
tactical
undeniable.
positioning.
More importantly, she possessed the rare and
that,
invaluable
Marines, is how we
ability to
optimize
propel
our strategic
students
deployment.
beyond their perceived limitations, whilst meticulously adhering to all appropriate safety protocols. The program, he concluded, had indeed acquired an exceptional instructor. 4 months into Eleanor's assignment, Alistair received an unexpected summons from Colonel Rupert Harrison, the base commander.
Control your
The
breath.
colonel rarely involved himself in training programs, unless issues of considerable magnitude arose. Chief Warrant Officer
Steady,
Finch,
Edward. Focus
I
on your
find I
breathing.
must
You've got
discuss your new instructor. Harrison began, settling into the visitor's chair across from Alistair's desk. With his expression unreadable, Alistair felt a knot of apprehension tighten in his stomach. Eleanor had been performing exceptionally, and her students were achieving truly remarkable improvements. He could scarcely
it's all
conceive what
thanks
might
to
have prompted the
Eleanor's
colonel's
incredible
personal attention.
instruction.
What manner of reports? So, if I may inquire, Harrison opened a folder containing several documents, crisply filed. 3 separate requests, Chief, from other
Perhaps
branches of His
teaching is my
Majesty's
truest mission
service, expressing a keen desire to borrow staff Sergeant Vance for specialist instruction. Furthermore, I have
Eleanor's
received
impact on
inquiries from
recruits is
certain
truly
civilian law
exceptional.
enforcement agencies who have, by some undisclosed
Eleanor, this next
means,
mission is
become
unlike
apprised of
anything
her
you have
unique
faced before.
capabilities. Alistair
ready for
relaxed
any
fractionally.
challenge you put before me.
These, he mused, sounded
fear they
more
will never
akin to
stop
positive
calling me back.
developments rather than problems. More concerning, perhaps. Harrison
Then we
continued,
will fight for
his
your
gaze
choice.
sharp,
Again,
is a report from the Defense
and
Intelligence
again.
Agency, expressing a rather pointed interest in her background. They appear to believe she might possess information pertinent to ongoing operations. This, Alistair conceded, was considerably more troubling. DIA
They will
involvement
not let
invariably
this rest.
signified classified matters of national security, affairs that could indeed complicate Eleanor's current assignment to a most
What is in that
inconvenient
directive,
degree.
Harrison?
Has Staff Sergeant Vance been apprised of these inquiries? Sir? Not as
Colonel,
yet, Chief, but I
this is
desired your
unacceptable.
assessment before determining how best to proceed. Alistair considered his
want her
response
tested
with
further,
meticulous
beyond
care.
training
Eleanor had
capacity.
proven herself an invaluable instructor, and to lose her to other assignments would undoubtedly impact the program
MOD
most
wants
detrimentally.
Eleanor evaluated for
Sir,
strategic overseas
Staff
deployment.
Sergeant Vance has been exemplary in
MOD
every
orders are
conceivable
clear,
respect.
We're
Her
deploying
students are
immediately.
achieving performance levels I confess I have never before witnessed. Whatever her previous assignments entailed, she is
can't believe this is
unequivocally
happening.
dedicated to her current role. Harrison nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression
Are you
on his
going to
face.
comply,
I
or are
comprehend
you
your
going to
position,
resist this new
Chief.
demand?
However, I have also received a request that
I came here
complicates
to
matters
teach,
further still.
Not to fight their hidden
Colonel
wars
pulled out
again.
another document, this one marked with the highest possible classification levels. The Ministry of Defense has formally requested that Staff Sergeant Vance demonstrate her capabilities for a joint service evaluation. Specifically, they wish to verify
hides her
claims
pain well.
regarding her maximum effective range. Alistair felt a chill of foreboding. Such official demonstrations,
Ministry of Defence's
he knew from
intent
long and
for
bitter
these trials
experience,
is
frequently lead
multifaceted.
to immediate reassignment, particularly
Eleanor
for
must be
personnel
allowed
of
to choose her
exceptional,
own role
indeed
in this.
unparalleled, skill. When is this evaluation
The
scheduled?
order is binding.
Sir? Next Tuesday,
She will
Chief.
undergo trial.
We shall have observers from Army Special Operations, Marine Force Reconnaissance, Naval Special Warfare, and Air Force Special Tactics. They desire to witness live-minus fire demonstrations at ranges exceeding 2,500 meters. Alistair grasped the implications
shield
immediately.
Eleanor again.
Eleanor would, in essence, be auditioning for reassignment to far more demanding and perilous operational roles. Her burgeoning career as an instructor might well be curtailed before it had truly begun. So, with the greatest
comes,
respect, Staff Sergeant Vance specifically requested assignment here to transition away from active operational duties. To compel her back into that environment might not, I humbly suggest, be in her best interests, psychological or otherwise. Harrison looked up from the documents, his expression firm. Chief, I appreciate your genuine concern for your instructor. However, personnel possessing her singular capabilities represent truly significant assets to national security. Sometimes, Chief, individual preferences must yield to broader, more imperative requirements. That very afternoon, Alistair summoned Eleanor to his office. He resolved to be direct, rather than attempting to ease into what promised to be a most difficult conversation. Eleanor, he began, without preamble, we need to discuss your future here. The Ministry of Defense has requested a formal demonstration of your advanced capabilities. Eleanor's expression, upon hearing these words, immediately became guarded, her eyes betraying a flicker of apprehension. What nature of demonstration? Chief, Alistair, was a heavy heart, explained the planned evaluation in the various agencies that had expressed a pressing interest in her services. As he spoke, he watched Eleanor's face grow increasingly tense, her composure hardening into a protective mask. But I specifically requested assignment here, Chief, to avoid precisely those types of missions. I understand that. Eleanor,
Hold steady, Eleanor.
Alistair replied, his voice gentle but firm. But your skills, I am afraid, have attracted attention at levels far above my authority to control. Eleanor rose and walked to the window, staring out at the expansive training ranges where she had, with such quiet dedication, been shaping the next generation of marksmen. What
She surpassed all standard
will be the
expectations
consequence if I
again.
refuse to participate?
Remarkable, isn't it?
Alistair had, of course, anticipated this very question. Officially, Eleanor. One cannot refuse a direct order. Unofficially, I might be able to procure some
better she
delay.
performs, the more they'll take her away.
Should you furnish me with truly compelling reasons? Eleanor turned back to face him,
I understand
her
your
gaze
concern,
piercing.
Finch, but
Chief,
the Ministry
there
of
are
Defense
certain
is
aspects
quite
of my
resolute on this
previous
matter.
assignments that I am, regrettably, not at liberty to discuss. However, I can assure you that continued exposure to operational environments would not, in the estimation of my own well-minus, be salubrious for me. Alistair recognized the carefully chosen words.
Eleanor's results
Eleanor
are
was
simply
subtly
unmatched.
indicating psychological concerns
Indeed, her
without
capability
explicitly
is quite
admitting to
remarkable.
trauma or stress disorders, which might, to her detriment, affect her security clearance. Is there anything in your medical record
must
that
remain
might
here
lend
as
support to a
instructor. Her
recommendation
value is
against further
multiplied through
operational
others.
assignment? Eleanor shook her head.
Her
Nothing
insights have
documented.
truly revolutionized our
Chief,
training
I have been
protocols,
meticulously
leading to
careful to
unprecedented
maintain my
improvements in
fitness
efficiency
minus from
and
minus
morale.
duty ratings.
National
Alistair
security
understood completely.
outweighs personal preference.
Many special operations personnel, he knew, often issued seeking
request to
mental
remain
health
as
treatment
instructor.
due
This is
to
where I
understandable
save
career
lives.
concerns, even when such treatment might prove profoundly beneficial. Eleanor, Alistair ventured, his voice low, if you participate in this demonstration, what, in your estimation, are the chances that you might deliberately perform below expectations? Eleanor considered the question
Her
with
decision
profound
deserves
seriousness.
respect.
Chief, she replied,
has given
her voice
enough.
firm. I have never, not
The
once,
results are
deliberately
extraordinary,
failed at anything.
but the morale impact must be considered.
I am not at all certain I could do so convincingly, particularly under the scrutiny of such
Eleanor will
distinguished
remain at
experts.
Wessex Downs
Alistair had
for now.
suspected as much. Eleanor's very nature, he concluded, seemed utterly incompatible with intentional failure. Then,
Finally,
Staff,
It
Sergeant,
is not over.
you must seek another
But
approach.
today,
Allow me
you
to make some
won.
judicious inquiries. Over the next 3 days, Alistair diligently
me
worked
keep
his
teaching,
extensive
Chief.
network of contacts,
that is
Yeah.
enough.
striving to uncover alternatives to the planned demonstration.
Gentlemen,
Most of his
today, we
inquiries,
push
to his
past
growing
limits.
frustration, lead to dead ends. But finally, he reached a former colleague, now ensconced in personnel assignments at the Ministry of Defense.
We are.
Alistair, This is a most
Wind at
difficult
200 meters,
situation.
8 knots,
His
quarter value
contact
left,
explained.
adjust for
His
1.5
voice
knots.
hushed over the secure line. There are individuals at very high levels who genuinely believe your instructor might well be the most capable long-ring shooter currently in His Majesty's service. They are quite determined to confirm her abilities for potential strategic
That, gentlemen,
assignments.
is how it's done.
What nature of strategic